Welcome back, everybody, to Joshua's Magic. It's a channel about the ordinary, mundane material world and the spiritual world coming together and the interplay of those forces. And today's video, we're focusing on the topic of interplay of various forces and energies and even peoples um, from the Alice Bailey quotes. And we're going to have a little bit of a meditation on this idea of interplay afterwards. But if you're interested in getting these quotes as I post them during the week, you can follow me on Instagram or Minds at Joshua's Magic. Links are below in the description. But we will move to the first quote here for discussion. An analysis of certain countries. The horoscope of a country can, therefore, be either that of the soul of the nation or of the personality of the nation. Based on the form aspect, there are no means as yet of determining the date, for instance, of the birth of a nation or a race. Boundaries are not determining factors, nor is history itself, as now given an adequate guide. As now, history as it is given now is not an adequate guide. As said above, some nations are entities and are demonstrably so, as for instance France or Japan. Others have been great and powerful nations, but are so no longer. But the strain is there of these. India and the Jewish race are illustrations. And I think this was written before the formation of Israel. Um, Other nations are relatively speaking very modern, as for instance the German nation, yet the strain is very ancient. Strains, types, races, nations, branches, and sub-branches produce a bewildering kaleidoscope before, excuse me, before which astrology necessarily stands confused. But to the eye of the enlightened esotericist, certain entities emerge clearly and form the nations of the world. The important factor always to remember is that it is humanity as a whole which is the factor to be considered. The simile of the human body, with its definitely recognized areas of expression, and the organisms which in their turn condition these areas will be helpful here. The important, the important and non-important appear. The developing and the vestigial also merge, and under the law of correspondences aid in elucidation. In the great body of humanity, there are certain areas which vibrate in unison and which will attract to themselves souls of a certain quality and keynote. There is a magnetic interplay between countries, territories, and the nations which occupy them. This is not an arbitrary matter, but due to magnetic interplay. It is also a vibratory interplay under the great law of attraction and repulsion, which has much to do with the intercourse and relationship between nations. So, he starts off talking about the horoscope of nations and then points out how it's almost impossible to figure out the horoscope. But an enlightened esotericist of a certain caliber of perspective, let's say, would have an understanding of these things and how to look at them and characterize them. And in this book, Destiny of the Nations, he goes through different nations and says what different rays they're on of the seven rays. Like for instance, the United States, he says the personality of the United States is on the sixth ray of abstract idealism or devotion. And then the soul of the United States is on the ray of love wisdom. So the reaching of the soul aspect, he says Lincoln was an avatar of the soul of the United States. And he really had this ethic of all men are, equal and freeing the slaves. And on the lower end, on the personality end, you could say there's a lot of ideological stuff. The sixth ray has a lot to do with ideologies and idealism, and that's not necessarily connected with practical reality. So you can have this really great ideal, but it's not really connected to anything that's workable. And you see that today. There's a lot of conflict between people, especially in the US, with different ideologies. And they're not really connected to practical reality a lot of the time. But he talks about different nations, territories, and groups of people, that there's a kind of magnetic interplay. And this, I think, is partially in reference to souls come into incarnation for certain reasons, but you don't come alone. You kind of come with a group of souls, and your group of souls, let's say that's 12 people maybe, or possibly less. Um, that comes in, but it also comes in with kind of a wave of souls. Um, and one thing he said is a lot of people in Germany were actually Jews in past during World War II that were Jews in past lives, and so they wound up persecuting the people that were Jews in that life, and so it was almost like this family conflict. He refers to it as. I mean, it was obviously a really horrible thing, but there's another dimension to it than all the historical stuff that people know about. He also says how a lot of I think that England was a reincarnation of the Roman Empire, and that the United States was a reincarnation of Atlantis. Though he may have phrased it as a lot of souls from those times came into incarnation in those countries, not that those countries were a reincarnation of it. I'd have to look at it again. But that's one example of this kind of law of attraction and repulsion, and different countries being informed by different energies. And if you're liking the video, please leave a like on it. It really helps to grow the channel. And please share it with somebody who you think would be interested in it. That would really help the channel's growth as well, and help get these ideas out to more people, so we can bring down some of the important ideas for the new age and raising people's consciousness. But we'll move on to the next quote. This inner realization, talking along the lines of the soul being infused with the personality, grows with the development of power in meditation, whether it is individual meditation or group work. Meditation is essential for establishing a freer inner spiritual interplay. Again, whether as a soul in relationship to the personality, or a group of disciples in relation to their master or each other. You might here well ask, why is this sensitive interplay between the disciples in a master's group regarded as necessary? Is not life complicated enough without too much awareness of the conditions, the personalities, the soul contacts of those with whom we are associated, and with whom we seek to walk as fellow disciples? I would like here to remind you that as disciples, you are in preparation for initiation, and that impending condition of consciousness implies three things: increased awareness and sensitivity to the experience in life in all forms, the power to do for others what I have attempted to do for you at present on a lesser scale, and later in other lives as I do it now, which you see means leading and kind of instructing this group of disciples. Three, the courage and strength to know all, to realize all, and to love with patient wisdom and unchanging sincerity. This must surely be apparent to you in the group work in which disciples are now called to participate. You have an opportunity offered which can aid in the inducing of all the qualities which are needed by you as candidates for initiation. At not such very distant date as we view time on the inner side. He words things really weirdly sometimes. So you can measure up to these things at not such a long date from the inner side. So maybe it's 100 years or your next lifetime or two or something, but not too long. But yeah, he's talking about the importance of meditation. And I would add to this, I think meditation is basically, in its most basic sense, the ability to focus your attention in a certain direction. And it doesn't mean necessarily, though obviously it can and does in many instances, mean, setting aside time to specifically focus on, a spiritual idea or some aspect of your life, or focusing on the soul, or, whatever specifically. But the aim of meditation at the current stage that most people are at is to, I mean, the lower end would just be to be able to focus your consciousness and, direct it instead of being scattered and all over the place. But after that, it's to align your mind, your attention with the purpose or the love and the light of your soul. And so doing that in time every day where you set aside to meditate on that can be useful. But what's needed eventually is to be able to throughout your day focus on the direction your soul is in and keep your mind steady in the light, pursuing that. Not like, people who go to church and then just do whatever they want during the week. And, I'm spiritual because I go to church. It's about living the values, the right values you get in church throughout the week. Much the same way meditation's kind of a guide ramp for you to be able to meditate all the time, and not in a way that's going to, put you out of alignment, but to be able to focus on your soul's plan in the world, um, day to day. So this interplay, when you attain that focus and you have that solid, you can have more interplay with other things. I mean, he's talking about the interplay of the personality and the soul, but then there's when you become part of a master's group at a certain point, there's an interplay between you and the other people in that group or that ashram. And these are things that you need to be aware of at a certain point anyway. But it's not something to fret about because, as time goes on, your capacity to connect with things and to deal with them grows and grows. Much the way when you were a child, you could barely walk or move things around, but then you mastered them over time. The same way with some of these spiritual realities and psychic faculties. So that is that quote. Moving on to the next one. And this one I used an AI image generation of like a futuristic city. I guess people didn't like that too much because I didn't get any likes on it, but okay. It is for humanity to solve its serious problems on the basis of brotherhood, and so bring in a way of living which will provide adequate supply of the necessities of life through the proper organizing of time, labor, and goods. This will lead to an interplay between the citizen and the state, which will evoke the service of the individual and the right protection of the state. Humanity will then be free for the experiment of spiritual living, and this will express itself through awakened human lives. Can more be asked for or expected than this? Such a way of life can be made possible if the men and women of goodwill, of intelligence and idealism can begin the task of inaugurating the New World Order. And so he mentions that phrase New World Order, which I touched on a little bit last week, which has been much maligned recently and, somewhat rightly so. But here he's talking about, well, just one point on it is the right protection of the state and um what does he say? Invoke the service of the individual. Yeah. So I guess it's sort of like, JFK saying, ask not what your country can do for you, but you can do for your country. And the state protecting, people's rights and civil liberties and stuff, not infringing them. And if you have that right interplay of things, the right balance on one level, you can move to another level. Like the example I was talking before, when you were a child and you could barely walk and manipulate objects, that was your focus. You had to work on that. But then when you were able to walk and move things around with facility, you didn't have to focus on that anymore. And you can move on to balancing out and learning something new. And so that's kind of what he's getting at here is we need to have kind of the basics of life more or less on par for everybody in the world before there can be any real attempt at genuine spiritual living. Um, and I personally don't think that's from a kind of communistic or socialistic point of view, but I think it's will happen within kind of free market mechanisms for the most part of sharing and right organization. And I think the molecular business is one attempt at that, which is a concept J.J. Dewey's written about. You can check out his works on freeread.com. Just do a search for the molecular business. I highly recommend it. But the molecular business, which is to just give you the gist, sort of more like a democratic business, but there's more to it than that. That's possible within a free market system. You don't need the government coming in and assigning all sorts of regulations. It's a kind of self-correcting entity that has top-down, leadership, but it also has bottom-up leadership, where in most businesses it's just top-down, and if the boss says something, that's all there is to it. But establishing these kind of right relations will enable us to, as humanity, move into what does spiritual living look like in reality in throughout society. And if we've got all these disparities of people are really poor and deprived in one place and people are really rich and wealthy in another place, it doesn't really allow that because there's this big imbalance. Um, so something worth thinking about how those things can be achieved because we really need to put in most of the work there. Jesus isn't going to come and straighten it all out. I mean, even when Jesus came the first time, or Christ came the first time, people thought he was just going to like destroy the Roman Empire and rule on earth or something. But he taught people the way, and it was up to them to live those values. And the same thing today. We've been getting a lot of spiritual truth, philosophical wisdom, um, good ideas on right relationships from psychology, and it's up to us to do the best we can to put that into practice. And if we try our best, we might someday be given a mission to do more than just setting your own life in order or being good to the people within your own sphere. But you got to do the best with what you've got or where you're at before you can maybe move on to higher things like that. The next quote is about the full moon meditation, which I haven't really talked about on the channel much. Carefully follow the approach of the full, carefully follow the work of the full moon approach. It will bring you much, and you should enter through its means into closer contact with the inner spiritual sun, the soul, and with all of us who, in varying grades of discipleship, seek to serve our fellow men. This full moon work involves the use of the creative imagination, the cultivation of the power to visualize, and the intensification of magnetic vibration of the ajna center, that's the third eye, and consequently of the pituitary body, that's the pituitary gland in your head. This establishes a magnetic field for the interplay of the currents and energies which are brought into action by the activity of the head center and of the pineal gland. These higher forces are brought in and utilized in the meditation process followed by the group. Now, some of this is a little bit specific to the group he was working with, but people all over use the sort of full moon meditation, or the time is of the full moon to meditate on the world of the spirit. And the idea is that the moon isn't doing something for you. The reason the full moon is a time where spiritual contact is more easily made is because the moon is not obstructing the energy from the sun. That's the understanding of it. So people will often meditate on the moon being in uh, Aries, let's say, because the moon will be in that sun, right? Like it'll be the constellation will be the moon will be between us and the constellation Aries. But the way the Tibetan looks at it is that that full moon is actually the full moon of Libra, the reverse, because the sun is the mediating agent there. It's the sun is in Libra because the moon is in Aries. And so there's this heightened energy and this heightened contact you can make during the full moon that's not as possible at other times. So conducting a meditation, using the creative imagination to build this sort of bridge and try to bring the energies down, either by yourself or in a group. He talks about being very useful. And there are a lot of groups who do this. If you want a specific full moon meditation, you can check out some of them. On to the next quote. This was an interesting image I found on Pixabay here. I shall utilize the word life when referring to spirit, to energy, to the Father, to the first aspect of divinity, and to that essential dynamic electric fire which produces all that is and is the sustaining, organizing cause and the source of all manifestation. I shall use the word appearance to express that which we call matter, or form, or objective expression. It is that illusory, tangible outer appearance which is animated by life. This is the third aspect, the mother, overshadowed and fertilized by the Holy Ghost, or life, united with intelligent substance. This is fire by friction, a friction brought about by life and matter and their interplay, producing a change and constant mutation. I shall use the word quality as expressive of the second aspect, the Son of God, the cosmic Christ incarnated in form, a form brought into being by the relation of spirit and matter. This interplay produces that psychological entity which we call the Christ. This cosmic Christ demonstrated to us his perfection as far as the human family is concerned through the medium of the historical Christ. This psychological entity can bring into functioning activity an equality within all human forms which exoterically can obliterate the forms and so engross the attention as to be regarded eventually as the main factor as constituting all that is. This truth as to life and quality and form is made most clearly apparent to us in the story of the Christ of Galilee. He was constantly reminding the people that he was not what he appeared to be. Neither was he the Father in heaven, and he is ever referred to by those who know and love him in terms of quality. He demonstrated to us the quality of the love of God, and in himself he embodied not only that which he had evolved of the seven ray qualities, but also, as do few sons of God, a basic principle of the ray of the solar logos himself, the quality of love. This we shall study more closely when we take up the consideration of the second ray of love and wisdom. And this is from the book Esoteric Psychology, sort of laying the groundwork here. But thinking of these different things of spirit, soul, and matter with the terms life, quality, and appearance is helpful. It changes up the way we think about things. And soul is produced from the interplay between matter and spirit. Spirit and soul not being synonymous, though in layman's terms they usually are. But this cosmic Christ isn't like a person, but it's like your personal Christ is your soul or higher self. Historical Christ, we know who that is. Um, but the cosmic Christ is something akin to like the higher self of the solar system, something like that. Maybe it's on a wider scale, maybe it's on a narrower scale. I'm not sure, but it's something like that. You could even say the higher self itself might be something akin to the cosmic Christ, because all souls are one on that level. Even though it may seem like us, my soul and your soul, they're all interconnected, and there's this oneness there, even if there's some differentiation. So I hope you guys found those quotes useful. Let me know if you did in the comments. But we'll move into a brief kind of consideration or meditation here. Just take a few minutes. And I want us to use this seed thought of interplay, the interplay of different forces or energies. And just, I'll lead you into it. So imagine you're on a platform that's rising up to the top of a mountain, and your emotional baggage, your physical tension, and your mental concerns and thoughts lose the power, lose the hold over you, and the light of your soul begins to shine gradually more clearly into your consciousness. And take this seed thought, the thought of interplay, and focus your attention on it. And in that light of your soul, allow it to expand in whatever direction is correct. And just take a few minutes of that. Pause the video if you need to. Again, if you need more time, just pause the video. But for Joshua's Magic, thanks everybody for coming by. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I wish you a great week, and I'll see you next time.